I would say, honestly, for most people at this point, the deal breaker might be Flash. That's the number one that end users would come across.
And there were some great strides made by Adobe before they decided to just pull the 64-bit Flash native.
Does anybody know why they did that?
I think that they made so much progress on 1, and then they had to very quickly get 10.1 final out, and they just decided to stop for the time being, because they had it close, but I don't know. Honestly, I wish I did.
You know what? I hear the Flash problems you have is on Ubuntu, right?
The Flash what?
He was asking, is your problem you were having on Ubuntu?
On Ubuntu 64-bit, right?
No, I'm on Arch 64-bit, and I had the problem on Fedora 64-bit, Ubuntu 64-bit.
Yeah, I'm going to say, I don't think it's just Ubuntu, it's the 64-bit.
It's the NS plugin reference, the problem.
I'm on 64-bit, and I'm using Mint 9 on my laptop, and I really don't have any problems with Flash. Flash works fine for me. It doesn't crash. It's not stopping. It's not lagging. It's working fine.
Maybe I haven't tried Mint 64-bit. I don't know.
Well, that's one of those things that makes me wonder. I'm waiting. It's like PCLen's working on a 64-bit version, and when it comes out, I'm gonna mess with it. It's in very extreme beta right now. I'm not one of the people in the Slack group on that. I don't know if you are, Jordan. But I'm almost wondering if Mint doesn't do some kind of secondary tweak to help make that stable. Because there's...
I've heard that, that Mint is more than just a bunch of stuff on it, because I've heard that they actually do make some optimizations.
No, that's the thing. Mint does a lot of additional... They started with the Ubuntu core as a starting point, but they made a lot of additional tweaks for what they were trying to do. And I'm wondering if they haven't tweaked something that fixed that maybe Ubuntu doesn't do because it's not in line with their core Ubuntu philosophies or something. Because there's a lot of things like that when it comes to Ubuntu. It's like you honestly wonder why they don't do it.
Yeah, or it could be just me, but in fact, now that I think of it, I have a 32-bit computer. I have a 32-bit desktop that I used before, and that's running Ubuntu, and that has more problems with Flash. Still, right now, it's running 10.04 than Mint 9 on 64-bit on my laptop.
So maybe it's the system, not so much the OS. Be interesting to do a full range of tests on that. Each of us only have so much hardware, though.
But I mean, I first ran Ubuntu on this, and I also had the problem with Flash. I mean, I'm not sure what it is, and I have noticed that 64-bit is more buggy, but I mean, on this particular system running 64-bit, I'm able to hibernate with Flash running, and when I come back, it's not crashed. It's at the same place. Suspend, all that stuff, it doesn't crash.
Well, hibernating or suspending shouldn't crash it. Your system may lag a little bit while it resumes, but it shouldn't crash it.
I'm just saying that I could leave it there or do whatever with it, and it's not really crashing for me.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying. Is that it's pretty. I'm not really experiencing any problem with it at all.
Okay.
It might be worth me checking out the Mint 9 64-bit.
Yeah, see if it runs right on your system that you were having the Ubuntu problems with. See if we can track down what that is.
If not, it might be my system.
Yeah.
That's possible.
Well, then we need to figure out what it is about your system that Flash loves so much. It's like...
out of curiosity, do you have an nVidia card?
Sure.
I do. No, I don't. I have an ATI. Wait, let me check. I believe I have an ATI.
The laptop I've been doing all this on is nVidia.
Okay, I do have ATI.
Okay.
Hold on.
It's why he's dealing with that. That's one other thing we should go into. A while back, I did a video where I basically, said, I don't recommend ATI for Linux, and that's just because that's an ATI thing. It's not that ATI cards don't work with Linux. As a matter of fact, a rather large number of them work exceedingly well. It's that whether or not an ATI card works with Linux really at the end of the day depends what kind of mood ATI was in when they made that card. And which driver they happen to go with, and whether or not it's one that either Linux can reverse engineer on its own, or that the chip it's accessible. Because depending on how the proprietary stuff on top of it's been done, if that is in no way, shape, or form released to Linux, and Linux either hasn't had time to reverse engineer it, or doesn't have the inclination because it's not that popular a card, you may just be SOL. For the most part, with nVidia, for the large part using the same driver, and Intel working with the Linux kernel development, odds are those are just going to work. Again, not that an ATI won't work. That's just been my experience on that.
See, I've got an ATI card in my primary desktop that I do all my screencasting from, and I use the open source drivers, and for screencasting it works really well.
Yeah. It also depends what you're going to...
3D applications, not so much.
Yeah, it's like it's the other thing. It depends what you're going to want to be doing. I was fortunate in that my old IBM, the proprietary stuff that needed to go on top of it for doing 3D stuff like CompHiz and other things like that was available to Linux. It isn't always when it comes to ATI. And you're really at the discretion of what mood ATI was in. I wish ATI would play more ball. I'd love to see all three of those competing equally on Linux, just like they do. I don't know if this is as much as it used to be, but once upon a time, this was also a real issue on Mac. It's become less of one now because Mac's achieved a certain market share, but it's...
I would like to say that I do have problems with my graphics card with ATI, but it does work with 3D, but it is a little bit, I'm seeing people on YouTube with less specs than me getting these smooth graphics with recording, and I can't get that. So
are you on are you on the open source driver or proprietary?
Proprietary driver.
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand.
He said he thinks he's on the proprietary one. If you're on the proprietary one, I would think it'd work better. Not to say proprietary is better than open source, but the proprietary one would be more optimized, which is
that's the funny thing. I actually tried to switch to the proprietary one on mine recently, and it actually tried to screw my system up. I mean, I could not move my mouse. It would just chug across the screen.
Okay.
I switched back and I was fine.
Intel graphics.
Huh.
Or nVidia.
Yeah, that would be interesting to say. Anyways, okay, before we get into this other topic, James, I haven't finished doing the post-production on it yet. I was trying to before we got this, but I didn't get quite there. James brought up an interesting comment yesterday about what the heck's going to happen to OpenOffice, and I thought that was an interesting sign. My honest assessment is I don't know. We went through a couple of hypothetical scenarios. Before we get into that, what do you think on that, Jordan?
The scenario with OpenOffice?
Yeah, with the fact that it's not Sun anymore, it's Oracle, and Oracle's kind of not really developing it anymore.
I think Oracle may have bit off more than they can chew with all the stuff they've bought recently. Or whichever bought whichever. I can't remember off the top of my head. The whole MySQL thing, they've been trying to do a lot of work on it. Just keeping up with all the projects they've got their hands in now is going to be kind of rough for them.
Well, I mean, the open source community has basically reached the olive leaf out to them and go, if you're not going to do anything with it, let us. I don't know if Oracle would be inclined to accept that offer. I don't know on that. That's one of the scenarios we went over is if they just try and kill it, or by virtue of having their hands too full, just let it die, but won't release it to the community. Would you see? I mean, how long would you think the community as a whole would wait? Because if the core of something, which is what Oracle would be responsible for this point, if they don't release it to the community to let the community work with it, you can only build on top of something so long before you need to go back and add new stuff to the core. Um, how long do you think the community as a whole would wait before maybe just going, well, we'd prefer to work with OpenOffice, but Oracle's dragging their feet and they won't give it to us and they won't let us, and why it's open source, we aren't really happy with this situation, so we're going to start investing a lot of effort into AbiWord or one of the other things.
I think if they were going to say that, they would have done it already, because I'm not saying that there's any problem with OpenOffice, but as compared to some of these other more lightweight apps, it is kind of bloated. The same thing could be said about the graphics drivers. We've been waiting for so long for decent proprietary drivers. You would think that the community would have really put a lot more effort into getting the open source ones ready, but there's only so much that can be done, and a lot of people will just take what they're given.
I have something to put into this. It's possible, I think, that Oracle might not be dragging its feet, and it might be ignoring this, because one interesting thing I noticed, when on the same week that I read in the news that Oracle bought Sun, I got an update to my Ubuntu system. I was running Ubuntu on my laptop on this time. Update to OpenOffice, and the only thing changed is now when OpenOffice starts, it has this nice Oracle branding on it. So they took the time to change that. They didn't really change anything else. So
the same with the Sun VirtualBox.
They're just ignoring it. They first thing they did, they branded it. But
well, no, it's like, and I forget what was that company? I can't even remember who they are now. That bought FreeSpire and Linspire, and they bought them to use as a base in their paid-for Linux distribution. But they basically just stalled all the development, and they just wanted to sell this technology, but not continue any development of it. And as a result, all those projects are basically dead, and everything that was built on top of them has been replaced by other projects, because it's not. I'm wondering if that's the route Oracle's taken here. Like if they're maybe they acquired this for some other project. I don't know on that.
Yeah.
And
I was just gonna look up to see who actually picked up Linspire.
give me a sec.
I think
Looks like Xandros had it.
Yeah, Xandros. That's it. That's what I couldn't remember. Yeah, it's like and basically Xandros wants you to buy Xandros OS. It's like, and any continued development going on that, they're making proprietary and theirs only, and yada and so forth. So anything like nVu, which was built on top of the old Linspire, FreeSpire stuff, has now been abandoned, and it's being replaced with other projects. And because it's like they can't, the projects that were doing that, they can't use that old stuff forever. They need to embrace the modern Linux kernel and move forward. There's gonna come. I think when we start to get to that point where it's just you can't squeeze any more life out of OpenOffice, the same thing that happened with all of that stuff. If Oracle really is going to just abandon this and just they have no interest in continuing development, I mean, we need an Office processing suite. You do. So unless Microsoft gets really smart and decides, oh, we're going to release Microsoft Office for Linux with per user licensing, which I don't see happening.